Okay, good morning. It's a gorgeous day outside. Spring is here, which means the semester and all the suffering it brings forth will soon be over. Today, I'm going to review the screenshots that I posted, that I linked under today's lesson plan, demonstrating the template, the structure, and the inner workings of Wikipedia pages. Don't forget that on Friday, besides continuing with this demo and showing some videos, I will also provide details about the final exam. I received an email about the final exam reminding me that there was a mistake in the syllabus initially. The month for the final exam was incorrectly set as December. I can confirm it'll be May. The day was right, the month was wrong, simply because the previous syllabus had a fall calendar. It was correctly indicated in the calendar. Okay, so it's Monday morning, December 16, May 16. There it goes. Okay, so whenever you look at any article in Wikipedia, especially articles that are medium length or longer, you see that there is a design, that there is a template that is not just based on the subdivision of the content, the distribution of the content across multiple sections and subsections accompanied by a table of content. There is also an intentional plan behind the way an article sets its start, the kind of information you will find in the first paragraphs, and how that information will then be developed. This is important to take note of because it applies largely even to your final project. That is to say, when you're working in your final project, you don't have to worry just about how to distribute the content across multiple nodes in Notion, in Evernote, multiple pages in DocuWiki, but you have to wonder what is an approach in terms of style that would be conducive to increasing accessibility for the user. There are two ways you can provide better access to information in your project. One, of course, is to organize the information by design with direct and indirect connections. Direct connections would be links, internal links especially, or sections that are duplicated across multiple pages for the convenience of the user, such as a glossary, etc. Then the indirect way to facilitate access is to program the project in such a way that there are ways you make use of the advanced features of your app, and there are ways to filter out and produce a small number of pages or sections and paragraphs that include specific info. But then part of this indirect process is also to include a format that makes it easier for the user to scroll through the pages because they know what they will find in a typical page at the beginning of the page, in the middle section of a page, at the end of a page. And so they can move quicker that way. This is part of what made Wikipedia successful. The fact, for example, that a lot of the basic information, a lot of the info that most users are looking for is here in the first paragraph. It doesn't matter whether it is a page on a dinosaur, as I picked randomly, a page on an actor, a page on a philosopher, a page on a film or a novel. Keep in mind that the first paragraph is also what will provide content for the pop-up window that will appear whenever you move over a link, right? This was added many years ago as a feature. When you place the cursor, when you move your mouse over a link and you stay there for more than a split second, a pop-up comes up, so that in most instances, if you want clarification on a definition, if you want to refresh your memory about who a certain character was, you don't even have to press that link, go to another page, then go back to your original reading. You can just read from the pop-up window and proceed. So, no matter what the page is, unless it is a very short page, because very short pages tend to be idiosyncratic, meaning that each will have their own custom design and custom approach. But the most frequented pages, the pages that get more hits, are all organized like this. A lot of the basic information are found in the first paragraph. The second paragraph will add more details and information that is more specific, but still information that is classified or believed to be, supposed to be essential for the quick understanding of what the page is about. Then, of course, you see a lot more going on, even though it may be largely ignored by a lot of users. In order of priority, and by prioritizing the kind of attention that is directed to these sections by the users, you find this box here, which will attract more attention than the rest of the elements in the interface. And this is an attempt by Wikipedia to provide a hierarchy, to place the article in the context of some kind of tree of knowledge. So the various links that you see dispersed across the first two paragraphs will take you in any number of different directions that are mostly flat, horizontal, or almost horizontal. Of course, especially in the first paragraph, you find some links that are vertical, leading to generic articles. For example, a generic article on tail, a generic article on forelimbs or hind limbs. And these are also vertical links, are also, for the most part, as you may have seen in the activity of Monday, monodirectional, unidirectional, right? Because inside the article on tail, you will not find a link to this specific dinosaur, right? Whereas you will find it most probably in the article about Arthur Smith Woodward, who was one of the discoverers of relevant remains of this dinosaur. Okay, so that would be a bidirectional link. But no matter whether vertical or horizontal, there is little that these links will do to place this animal within a knowledge tree of ancient animals, and this instead is taken care by this box in this case, where you find the domain, the kingdom, the phylum, the clade, etc. So you have not only a vertical disposition, but a hierarchical disposition, right? Because tail, forelimbs, hind limbs go straight up vertically, but there is no sense of hierarchy. It's just that tail is a larger group, and this article would be a specific element in that group among the many for animals that have a tail, right? But there is no sense of the hierarchy in terms of the levels of knowledge, the same way that this box will try to do. Of course, depending on the topic of the page, this box by itself might not provide much of a tree of knowledge. For example, if you take a movie, this box will instead have the names of the producers, the name of the director, the main actors, when the movie came out, etc. which is not much of a hierarchy, right? It's still, in that case, a combination of horizontal and vertical links, right? Where the verticality of a link may be that the movie is one of the movies done by a director, so it's, again, the element of a group. The director being the higher level simply because the article for a particular movie director will contain links to the articles, the pages, for all of their movies. As you can see, in order to produce these screenshots and show you whatever else is going on with Wikipedia, I logged in. You can see that because, such as in the case of DocuWiki, you see at the top right corner, log out, which means that I was logged in as a registered user of Wikipedia. So some of the elements that you see here are not present if you don't log in, or are not clickable if you don't log in. So having logged in, I can see the history of the page, I can edit the source of the page, or I can just read. And then, of course, you have the sidebar, which is typical for every wiki. In a typical fashion, similar to what happens to Wikipedia, to DocuWiki, if you click on the logo on the top left corner, that is a quick way to get back to the portal. Okay, so that takes you to the main page, in this case of the English language version of Wikipedia. And then the rest of the sidebar we will examine through this series of screenshots, takes you to the main sections, right? The main page, the contents, current events, random article, which would be like I feel like in Google, about Wikipedia, contact us, donate, and then more, how to contribute, and a series of guidelines and information about the tools that can be used. We can see how the article continues, right, from the summary of what is believed to be the most frequently accessed, the most frequently searched information in the first paragraph, which makes Wikipedia very nimble, easy to use, because it doesn't matter if you have a page that requires pressing page down 10 or 15 times to go through the entire content. 90% of the people will just need the first paragraph or the first two paragraphs. The third paragraph may include information about the classification or the origin of the name, if it is a place, for example, some of the history, etc. In this case, what you find in here is where the remains of this dinosaur were found. And again, if you look at these links, you find a long series of links to other families, other kinds of dinosaurs. So some of them are groups. So some of these links are more vertical, other links are horizontal, just linking, taking you to similar dinosaurs. Following this, after the third paragraph in this case, but it's not a law, it could be one or two paragraphs only, it could be four, you find finally the table of content, but intentionally the table of content has been placed farther down because they want to have as much information as possible available within the first screen, so that even without scrolling down, the user will have access to key information. And from the table of contents, you can see how this article is organized. And the organization will fit the content, but it will always be a meaningful organization or structure, nothing random ever, right? You go from the history of discovery, background, discovery, name, mise-assigned species, to the description, to the classification, to the paleobiology, the notes, the references, further readings, and external links, where 5 through 8 are part of the essential process of sourcing, right? Because both in the notes and in the reference, but indirectly also under number 7 and 8, you find external sources where you can verify the information that was posted on Wikipedia. Okay? Now, what are the two key elements of this kind of interface or platform? One, we've already seen plenty of, the links, right? The page is populated with links. And this is just the evolution of a process, as we said, that began with the printing press, with the printed books, and the way printed books were organized, reached its plateau with the French encyclopedia, for which every article includes a number of references to other entries in the volumes of the French encyclopedia, and then you have the digital version of this, an explosion of links sending you in a variety of directions. The other key element that we have to put, that I have to put your attention right away, is that you can just click on the Edit tab and go from reading a page to modifying that page. Depending on whether you're registered or not, depending on whether you're a seasoned contributor, a contributor with a history or not, your changes might remain pending until approved, and initially instead anyone could change it. But the fact remains that within 2 clicks, I can go from reading a page to changing the text of that page. And that is the other fundamental aspect of this platform, and the fundamental aspect of any wiki: collaboration, right? A wiki is not just about knowledge in terms of content and organizing knowledge as you go in a quick way with quick revisions, quick changes or expansions made possible, but also collaboration made easy and also regulated, because every wiki will allow for certain regulations. In this case, for example, the fact that your change is stored in the platform, made pending, people can access both the official version of this page, your proposed revision of the page, and then some moderator can say, okay, it's approved, and your changes become the published version of the page, and the page itself goes into the history. It's not forgotten, it's stored, archived, so that anyone can go back, changes can be reverted, revisions can be examined in a chronological fashion, right? The history of the page can be seen. Right after you click on Edit, this is now, it wasn't like this at the beginning, but this is now the toolbar that is offered to the user, and similarly to what you find in DocuWiki, you find the same kind of pencil icon, pencil or crayon icon for editing, only this time, after many years, instead of just going the same way that you go for DocuWiki to add code. Type in, you have source editing, which would be like the DocuWiki editing you've done, you've tried, but you also have now visual editing. And with visual editing, you don't have to look at all the code behind the page. For example, the code that produced this image framed by the text. No, you can look at the page as it is pretty much. And if it is just a matter of adding words, you put your cursor anywhere and you start typing. If it is a matter of adding a link, you select something and then you apply the link to the selection, which will become linked to something, etc. So much easier, much more user-friendly than it used to be. And again, you can go from reading to editing with just 2 clicks, one for edit, one for the pencil, and then from there you select what kind of interface you would like to rely on. And look at the other options on your toolbar, right? We'll go through these options with the next screenshots. Again, you don't have to do any active work on Wikipedia, but it's just for your knowledge so that you know what happens or the steps that a user goes through in order to make changes to a Wikipedia page or create a new Wikipedia page. These, by the way, are the notes and the references, and again, they're very prominent, and it's easy to see the principle of verifiability of sources and sourcing itself. The fact that whatever you put in a Wikipedia page has to have external sources, cannot be primary research. You see that at work. Now, as I suggested, if you want to use, as a student, Wikipedia for more than just learning about a few simple facts, and simple basic facts are rarely wrong in Wikipedia statistically, but otherwise, if you want to pursue this further, this is where you would go. If you want to include some information that you discovered from Wikipedia, you don't use Wikipedia as a source. You go to this section and you go and read one of these articles, and that will be the source for your paper, right? Doesn't matter that you found it through Wikipedia. It is, in fact, one of the quickest ways to find the basic relevant sources, right? Because a lot of papers done at university level by undergraduate students involve these kind of sources, right? Don't quote from Wikipedia, use it wisely. And the external links, right, follow, and then here, in this case, but it's not always the case for every kind of page, it's easier for the sciences especially, whether it's be the page for an atom or other physical, biological phenomena. In here, it's easier for them to also support this page with all its links taking you in all kinds of different directions with a pyramid of knowledge, with a hierarchy, right? So in here, you have links and categories organized in such a way that you know where to place this dinosaur, right? So there is a sense not only of the verticality or horizontality of your intellectual journey, but also the hierarchy, what is more important, how anything is related to anything else. But that's not always the case. And it goes on and on in this case, right? Including this final list of categories that are connected. Now, everything in here, especially these categories, were contributed by the users. So one of the things that people do at this point is modify. There aren't that many new pages that are being added. However, you can add relevant categories, for example, right? And the code allows you to do that in specific ways. Let's go back to the code. Keep in mind that one of the features in the toolbar is this warning sign, right? And if you click on it, they tell you, wait, keep in mind, you're editing Wikipedia right now, and this used to be the featured article. That's how I chose it. So you would expect a featured article in the main page of Wikipedia to attract a lot of attention and people trying to modify it for the good or the bad of the page. So there is plenty of warnings. You are editing it, and if you press publish change, your changes may be publicly viewable immediately. Maybe because, as I said, a lot of pages will require approval. That is not necessarily the case. And some pages will require a long time for approval. Constructive changes are welcome, but please do not attempt to damage the article. They're aware of the issue of vandalism, which is endemic, right? And affects any kind of repository of knowledge. As I said before, when we talked about hoaxes, there were hoax entries in the Encyclopedia Britannica, in the Oxford English Dictionary, in a lot of authoritative publications, right? And there are plenty of examples of prankish vandalic acts, anywhere up to, as I mentioned at some point, adding the drawing of a bicycle to a manuscript by Leonardo da Vinci to suggest that Leonardo da Vinci invented the bicycle. And it's surely a prank. Now, after this warning, they also tell you, use the sandbox. The sandbox or playground is a place where you can play with the code, experiment with changes before you become familiar. They're saying there could be intentional vandalism, right? Destructive changes, changes that are foolish in nature, but there could be also the inexperience, right? Members of the community or external users, outsiders, lacking the expertise and taking down a page by putting in the wrong code. Use the sandbox for test edits, meaning so that you're sure that whatever code you add is sound. Go to talk and then the name of the page to see the discussion that is going on, meaning remember that you're not just an individual user, you're part of a community of Wikipedians. So don't do anything individually, especially if you don't have a lot of experience. Be part of the process. Then they tell you about the tutorial as well. So Wikipedia is trying to educate the user at the same time. Let's review the main elements of this toolbar. There is the symbol for the font, and when you click it, the drop-down will immediately show you the most commonly accessed formatting codes, bold, italic, or remove something. And this is for the visual editor, mind you, right? Why is underlined not present there? Because, of course, you don't want to have underlining used as a formatting feature for a wiki, because that is reserved in the digital world to links, and you don't want to confuse users by introducing underlining that is just for beautifying the text. When you click on more, you can see less frequently accessed formatting, kinds of formatting, superscript, subscript, strike through, computer code, underline, if you really need to and there is no other way, characters in different languages, making the font bigger, smaller, etc. Next to it, you find the chain icon that is universal, almost universal for links. And there you have, when you click on it, a symbolic representation of what links are about. And again, this representation, of course you know what a link is, but this is just to refresh, to direct your attention to the fact, to educate you to the fact that links are part of the process of knowledge, of organizing knowledge, right? That's why you see these examples, these visual examples, and then you also have an educational message, right? To guide you to proper behavior. Links, link important words to other wiki articles or even other websites. It will help readers understand the context. So they tell you what to do and why to do it. And then you can click on, okay, got it, to proceed if you have something positive to contribute. At which point, if you proceed, you can add a link within Wikipedia and you can start typing here and the system will suggest with auto-completion a page to link, or you can copy and paste here the link to an external site. And they already have some suggestions, right? Based on this, they try also to direct you as a contributor to things that the algorithm finds possibly related to the page. We move now to the next element in the toolbar side, and once again we have a visual representation and a text to educate the user. Citations improves your content. By adding sources of information, you can cite from books, newspapers, and websites. So they give you some examples, and then you press, okay, got it, to proceed. And this is what you find when you proceed. you can add a URL, and other systems that are common for digital sources. The DOI is the permanent link to a digital source, such as a scientific article or a digital book on an open access platform. ISBN is the 9 or 13 number code for a book, etc., etc. The next element on the applet for editing, for visual editing, allows you to introduce bullet lists, numbered lists, or to increase and decrease indentation. And you know that most of these things are available also in systems such as DocuWiki. Well, decrease and increase indentation only if you add the correct plugin. Next element on the toolbar is insert, which allows you to bring in images or other media, to borrow a template for a specific page, right? Because different categories of pages, for example, for animals, etc., have different templates, to put in a table, to put in a comment, hieroglyphs, musical notations, a gallery, a chemical formula, a math formula, a map, a code block, etc. Inks, digital ink, graph, reference list, etc. The next one is for the insertion of symbols with the same omega icon that you find also in DocuWiki, which allows you to access the ASCII table characters and the extended ASCII characters, right? You have on the left the selection, often used Latin, Latin extended, with this would be ASCII and ASCII extended, IPA symbols, etc. The next one on the toolbar is the question mark before the warning, which of course helps you go to the user guide or to shortcuts or to feedback about the platform. We've seen the warning sign, so we move on. Next is options of different kinds, and when you click on it, this is what you get. Among the options you find categories, and categories are part of the classification, parts of some kind of tree of knowledge, right? So all of this would be categories that are relevant for a dinosaur, and they would change for other pages, depending on the content, right? If it is an automobile, the categories might be microcar, sports car, race cars, etc. Page settings has only a few options. You can redirect a page, meaning that you don't want people to see this page, that the information has been merged into another page, and therefore you want to, anyone looking for a certain entry will be redirected to the right place. The right place, or the most frequently accessed place, right? When there is ambiguity, instead of taking you to all the choices, that will take you to the most commonly accessed page with that name, and then give you a chance to see at other possibilities. You can do things with the table of content, although this is frowned upon, right? You will want to find the table of content in practically any Wikipedia page, but they're allowing for exceptions, and there are other settings that you can play with. So notice that in terms of culture, the idea of crowdsourcing dominates the interface. That is to say, not only are users who simply register and within a few seconds can access these options to change the text, but even the settings, even the configuration is within reach for the regular user, even though there will be a community hopefully overseeing the process. Again, the real difference we mentioned between something like Reddit and the community of Redditors and the community of Wikipedians is the timelines. The cycle of an article is a long-term cycle, weeks, months or even years may go by before something is properly reviewed. And mistakes or acts of vandalism are spotted. This is the alternative to the visual editing. This is the same page with all the codes. The vertical bars, the curly bracket, the square brackets, all the codes that you're familiar with for a page in a wiki, and DocuWiki was a very good example of that. You can have the codes highlighted pretty much the same way that you would do with a programming language, so that you have the text in black and the codes in different colors depending on what they are about. And we're not going to focus on all the details of this coding language, but right away you notice that some things are very similar to DocuWiki. Look at the equal signs for a title, only it's done in reverse. So the fewer equal signs you find, the higher is the level for the heading. So this would be H2, whereas H2 level for DocuWiki is 5 equal sign. This would be H3, whereas in DocuWiki would be 4 equal signs, right? You can see how the image framed by the text was inserted, right? With a reference to an internal file uploaded to the server, right? They're not fetching the image from outside. They have it on their server. And where the image should be placed, left the standard size of the image, which is thumb in this case, instead of specifying a pixel number. They have an alternative text for visual accessibility, anyone accessing the page with a software that reads from the page, and therefore they wouldn't be able to see the image, but they would hear their software reading what the description of the page. Photograph of bones in a glass display case with descriptive writing behind, etc., etc. Okay? And opening and closing square brackets, in this case square brackets instead of curly brackets. Notice the links, right? Sometimes the links are all you can see, the name of another page that is linked here. Sometimes you have a label. That is to say, you have brackets, then the reference to a page, but they don't want the name of the page to be used, to be shown for the link, instead of 1842 in paleontology, which is the title of another page. They insert a label after a vertical bar, like in DocuWiki, with 1842. But in other instances, they just have the link to the word paleontologist. There is a separate page for that, a link for Richard Owen, etc., etc. So, simple enough. It looks complicated, but it isn't. The learning curve is not that bad. Besides editing, as I said, you can access the history of all the changes made to the page and made by whom. So you can see for every point, every bullet point in here, different data, the chronology of the change, the username of the person who did the change, whether a change was reverted, and reversals of changes and revisions are used by Wikipedia to alert the managers of the platform of some controversy going on. That is to say, after a change is reverted and then reverted back by the same user or by someone else, you know that there is something going on that should be investigated, right? Because instead of approaching this through a discussion, there are some people who are just saying, I'm right, no, I'm right, and they're changing each other, right? They're canceling each other out. From this page, you can access all the historical versions of this page. So this would be a temporary. You see the yellow box? It says this is an old revision of this page, but I can still review it in case some destructive changes were made or changes justified by some kind of intentional or unintentional vandalism. And again, you can do that for any of these pages, and you can see any number of them. And you can also access the discussion, which is in some instances very interesting for some of the controversial pages. You can find references to the moderators. Some pages have moderators. And then you find the nature of the change that was made and whatever comments were posted. Usually it's good practice if you make some substantial changes, not just a simple correction of a typo, to indicate why you made that change or why you added some information as to alert others reviewing that page of your motivation, right? And you can see the development of the of this discussion. Someone saying, for example, I know you did this all the way back in 2008, but someone is asking in 2020 to the person who made the change, can you remember what skeletal reference you used to make your Galantosaurus drawing all these years ago, etc., etc.? And again, some discussions can be more interesting. This is the website, the official website of the software used to build Wikipedia, and it's open source software, pretty much like DocuWiki. It's called MediaWiki, and anyone can use it. You can create a page and post it on the internet on an external server based on MediaWiki. You can put it on your computer, which is true also of DocuWiki. You can make your own virtual server and run pages just for yourself without posting them on the web. And you can see that MediaWiki has a site that follows the same basic template of Wikipedia, right? Sidebar, the various tabs, the ability to log in from the top right corner, etc., etc. And of course, in there you find the documentation and the tutorials to learn the proper way of coding. And as you can see, the traditional approach when you're not using the visual editing tool and the toolbar that comes with it is based on Markdown, right? Meaning by repeating 2 or 3 times a regular key that you find on any keyboard, instead of showing that key, you produce a result. So with 2 single quotes, you italicize a word. With 3, you make it bold. If you use 3 plus 2, 5, you have bold and italics. And in order to escape the markup, you have no wiki, which is one of the codes you also find literally in DocuWiki. For the various levels, you start from 2, right? Because otherwise a single equal sign would just be shown as text. And you have level 2, 3, 4. So just the numbering is inverted compared to DocuWiki, but basically it is the same kind of coding. Same for horizontal rules. Even in this case, you have 4 hyphens, and it puts there a horizontal line. For bullet lists, you find stars or asterisks. Only this time you don't have to start with 2 blank lines. As long as you start your line with an asterisk, you create a level, and to go deeper, you just add more. So 2 stars would be the next sub-level, 3 the sub-sub-level, etc., etc. You can do it in different ways. There are some alternatives, including things that are being codified into the platform because they're very frequent. For example, adding a definition, which they do a lot of. For a numbered list, they use the number sign, right? And once again, you start with 1 at the beginning of a line for level 1, and the sub-levels are just a multiple of the same symbol, right? And you see the effect for the alphanumeric numbered lists. They also have a different kind of list, which is an item list, and ways to indent the text just using your keyboard instead of the visual editor, this time with a colon at the beginning of a line will be the first level of indentation, and then you multiply the same symbol at the beginning of a line to have multiple levels of indentation, and you can combine different symbols to produce more complex lists. Creating an account is very simple, right? Once again, though, you have the educational part of this. They warn you that your username will be public, and they tell you Wikipedia is made by people like you, and they tell you how many edits, how many articles, how many recent contributors, and no matter what, we always see this around the same number, between 120,000 and 140,000 for a number of years. It's been the number of active contributors. And there are more. You can add to your profile more information. This is just to show you that there are pages that cannot be modified even when you log in. This series of screenshots was taken in 2020, so because of the presidential campaign, no one was allowed to modify the page for Donald Trump or Biden. I'll show you Biden in the next page. And you see this lock symbol with an E to show that this is an extended lock, meaning this page is not to be unlocked anytime soon, because otherwise partisans, supporters, and opposers of this politician will just be making changes all the time and essentially ruining the page. So this is done especially for celebrities of all kinds, not just politicians, right? It could be athletes, it could be singers, actors, depending on whether or not there is a controversial issue that would see warring factions, those who don't like the haters and those who support this celebrity. So same period, same kind of treatment, of course, for Joe Biden, locked with an extended lock. And you have an explanation of what it means, what that symbol is. It's an extended confirmed protection, etc., etc. So extended confirmed protection, also known as 3500 protection, only allows edit by editors with the extended confirmed user access. So veterans, people who have a long history of positive contributions, granted automatically to register users with at least 30 days tenure and 500 edits. 500 edits is a lot in 30 days, so most people in that case have a longer history. And then they talk about different kinds of vandalism. And this is an example of the revisions that were made, nonetheless, in that page. And for any of those revisions, one of the features that I haven't shown you before is this one, that you can compare two versions. You can select from the list of revised pages, historical pages, two, and see what the differences are. So you can spot visually what changes were made, or in this case, deleted. Someone had added about Joe Biden's wife, her grandfather was Pennsylvania's first state senator, and someone else in the discussion said, is this really relevant? We shouldn't include this. And that's how it was modified. Keep in mind that whenever you look at revisions and modifications to a page, sooner or later you will encounter not just users making those changes, but bots. A lot of bots. There aren't a lot of bots, meaning there are 40 plus million users. The bots are in the thousands. Not even in the hundreds of thousands, are in the tens of thousands. Depending on the period, there may be just a few thousands. But in this case, the user is ClueBot, and they give you the story of this, and so these are scripts that are crawling through the text, making changes, right? Fixing links and such. Now the next part I will just commence and then proceed. In this case, it was the 2020 fall semester, the last time this course was offered, and Sean Connery, famous for playing the part of 007 James Bond in the first James Bond period, the 1960s, had just died, so I picked that page to add a few more things, a few more information about the interface. Okay, so just to make, for the sake of examples. And we're focusing on the sidebar in this case. So any article, including the one about Sean Connery, has the same list of sections next to it. And if you click on either the symbol up there of Wikipedia, the globe, with the various fonts, the various languages, or main page, this is where you go, right? And again, you have a fixed template pretty much. Welcome to Wikipedia. And what is Wikipedia? What is the mission of Wikipedia, or the fundamental aspect, crowdsourcing, how many articles there are, and this is updated daily. And if you click in here, you will see how many users were active. And in here, you see different portals. So they're very aware of the impression that links can take you anywhere. So they want to direct you properly. Gives you a sense that, yes, we've also organized. Yes, you can go from a chemistry or biology lecture to the makeup artist of Star Wars, as College Humor suggested with Professor Wikipedia video. But we've organized this according to a traditional hierarchy, so you can find a portal for the arts, one about biography, geography, science, etc., separate portals. And part of the template for the basic entry page of Wikipedia is to have a featured article of the day, usually related to some current event or some anniversary, references to what is going on in the news, etc., and we can see the rest in the next screenshots. So, as I said before, this was what is seen whether you click on this or on main page. So there are two ways to access the portal, from the sidebar, and they have a lot of information that is kind of random. It's just to encourage people to click, right? It's not a commercial platform, but clicks and page visited are for them indication, evidence of their success. They have an on this day anniversary information. So a couple of weeks ago on this page you would have found the Stony Brook mathematician who won a prestigious prize that was like the Nobel Prize for mathematicians, for example, because that happened, and so we were featured there. They also have a featured picture, in this case an illustration with some basic explanation, and then they have other sections such as other areas of Wikipedia, sister projects, right? These are other platforms, for example, where they store their media, their videos and pictures, some of which are included. They have their dictionary in a variety of language, which is Wiktionary. They have Wikisource, which is like Project Gutenberg with fewer texts. And for a number of years, they've tried to get into the news. It is clear from the portal. It is clear from the inclusion in here of Wikinews, and then they created a separate platform called WT for that, but they've never been as successful with these kinds of ventures. No matter how many times they've tried, they haven't been able to change the news and the process to create the news as much as they did for the traditional format of the encyclopedia.